Hello there! Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. So much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I am so glad you've joined me for the final part of our story tonight, and what a fascinating story it is. So let's continue with it, shall we? One night I heard a great deal of activity going on in the next door apartment belonging to Izzy and Rog. I could hear Izzy's pained cries, and the sounds of what I assumed was a midwife scuttling around and telling Izzy to take deep breaths, that she was going to be all right. Breathe! Breathe slowly. In, out, that's right. You're doing well. You're doing well. Oh, the pain! The pain! Calm down. It's going to be fine. Do I have to listen to her? Didn't I tell her she should have gone to a hospital? I knew it was going to be like this. I heard Izzy let out an ear-piercing scream. A chill went down my spine, and I shuddered. The birthing process must have caused her more agonizing pain than she had envisaged. I had warned her about this, but Izzy had refused to listen. She was a braver woman than I was, and I admired her for that. If I was giving birth, I would absolutely insist on an epidural, because I can't stand enduring pain of any kind. I wish I could be on hand to have helped Izzy, but that could not happen with Rog around, who had decided that I was the lowest form of pond life, and he certainly didn't want me anywhere near his wife. I had warned Izzy that giving birth to a baby was no walk in the park. I was now dying to know if she'd given birth to a boy or a girl. She didn't want to know the sex of her baby, and only wanted to find out after the baby was born, something I failed to understand, because I would have wanted to know what the baby's sex was. She knew Rog wanted a boy. Soon things became very quiet, and I took this to be a positive, very good sign. I smiled happily to myself as I thought of Izzy holding her new baby in her arms, with a contented, gleeful smile on her face. I was sure she was exhausted and euphoric at the very same time. She must be so happy to finally be a mother. Hopefully I could give her a call surreptitiously in the morning, visit her while dropping her some chocolates, flowers, and a magazine for her to read. That was, of course, if the ever-insufferable, domineering Rog had the good grace to leave the apartment for a while, so that I could clandestinely descend on my friend and visit her. I knew Rog did not want me anywhere near his wife. He had made that perfectly clear. He was actively encouraging Izzy to sever all ties with me. I knew Izzy would be a proud mother. She had the nursery kitted out to perfection, and expertly prepared for the new little addition in her life. A week prior we had enjoyed a hen party together, with lots of friends who had given her delightful gifts in eager anticipation for the arrival of her forthcoming new baby. Somehow I did manage to get to sleep, but then in the middle of the night I heard this banging sound at my front door. I sat up with a start, having been startled by the rude interruption to my dreams. What the hell, I thought. What the hell? The banging was persistently loud. It made me so nervous that I actually went and removed the baseball bat that I kept under my bed as a protective makeshift weapon that I never considered I would ever need to use. In truth, I thought the Grim Reaper had to be at my front door by the ominous sound of that very unsettling rapping. I tiptoed cautiously across the luxurious thick pile of carpet from my bedroom to the entrance hall, without making a single sound. Someone was trying to look through the letterbox in the front door. They kept banging it loudly and trying to look through the slit. Whoever they were, they seemed resolutely determined to get my undivided attention, and were not going away any time soon. That was clear. I sneaked up to the door, glad that I was decently clad in a rather stylish tracksuit, wearing a pair of non-slip socks on my feet, so that I looked halfway presentable, and wasn't wearing a flimsy nightie. I gingerly peered through the spy-hole to see a familiar figure standing there in the soft light of the outside lights that lit up the passageway of the apartment block. So even at the dead of night like this, you could see relatively well, although at the time we had no cameras in the apartments. I could see it was Rog. What the hell did he want at this time of night? I inwardly grimaced, my heart flapping wildly in my chest. "Who is it?" I called nervously, knowing full well who it was. There was a long pause, and then I heard a deep voice saying, "It's Rog. I thought you should know that Izzy had a baby boy." It was Roger's genuinely excited words that dismantled the apprehensive guard I'd put up to defend myself against such a man. I should have told him to go away. I suddenly felt excited. Izzy had had a baby boy. This was the best news ever. Maybe Rog was going to be halfway decent towards me from now on. He was probably a proud father and wanted to shout out the good news about his baby boy to the rooftops and to everybody else who would listen, even if it meant he had to share this news with his annoying next-door neighbour. I assumed the birthing process had gone very well, and maybe Rog would apologise to me for being so unreasonable. I opened the door unhesitantly, as not for a single second did it occur to me that I could be putting myself in danger. I had heard Roger's reassuring calm voice. I had not fully appreciated that the kind tone of voice could easily have been a ruse to get me off my guard. I put the baseball bat into the umbrella stand next to the hall table. It wouldn't look good opening the door holding that up. I opened the door, pulling back the chain, and then Rog stormed past me rudely into my apartment, with the former rather abrupt presumptuousness he had displayed in the past, where he completely abandoned any social graces or good manners. The only way I can describe his entrance into my apartment was like an elephant in musk, as he thundered into my apartment, as if his manic testosterone levels seemed to have shot into overdrive, almost as if he couldn't contain the burning hot molten lava boiling within him that was about to explode. It would seem that all the ornaments in my apartment began to rattle precariously and shake, as if even these inanimate objects sensed trouble was brewing. The stuffed zebra my mother had given me after my wrist operation came flying off the mantel, landing in the middle of the floor, as if dead, almost like a prognostic inauspicious omen about what was about to unfold. Rog walked over my stuffed zebra, crushing it beneath his heavy boots. He thundered towards me with brusque, ungainly movements, like elephants in the wild running through the brambles without giving them any attention. My favourite glass vase that was balanced on a round glass wrought-iron table seemed to have become airborne for a brief second. It crashed on the ground, scattering the roses, petals and water all over the thick pile carpet. The glass itself broke into hundreds of tiny shards. I had no concern for the mess. My only worry was getting this wild, untamed animal out of my apartment, as Rog looked absolutely savage. I was trembling in my socks. I stared at him, with a feeling of impending dread overcoming me. The way Rog was glaring at me rattled my bones to the core, and sent my fear shooting through my blood as frantically as a fast-moving freight train. I could virtually see steam rising out of Roger's flaring nostrils, and I'm not kidding either. Rather like the condensation you'll see on a bathroom mirror. He appeared to be sweating. There was sweat all over his forehead, beads of perspiration running down his face. Seeing him in this peeved state made fear become my immediate companion, and helplessness its very close friend. "What's going on, Rog?" I stammered. "Why are you so angry? What's the matter?" My words seemed to provoke Rog to further rage. He bristled, and with one powerful, mighty hand he lunged towards me with a forceful grip. He thrust one hand under my chin, and then pushed me against the wall. It felt as if every bone within me threatened to break. Was the man really not aware of his own strength? He was hurting me badly. I winced in pain. "Get your hands off me, Rog, please!" I blurted, trying to push the man off me. But I was no match for him, and my efforts were futile. "What's going on, Rog? Why are you being like this? Why are you so mad?" "You stupid woman," he said, while holding me down against the wall. "You really don't know, do you? You have no clue what you've done, because you're as stupid as you look, and as ignorant. If you must know, my Izzy gave birth to a stillborn baby earlier this evening. She's devastated. Devastated, he repeated again, besides herself with grief. You hear that? And I blame you for all this. This is your fault entirely. You are responsible for murdering my boy. I'm sure the baby could have been saved if there had been a doctor around, but no such thing. That wasn't possible, because she gave birth to her baby in a birthing pool thanks to you. You filled my wife with insane, warped ideas, and now she's lost our baby. You're an interfering, big, nosy busybody. My wife was all right until she met the likes of you. I trembled. Tears spilled down my cheeks, dropping onto the thick carpet pile. I was so sad to hear Izzy's tragic news. This was so devastating. I never expected this to happen. Izzy had enjoyed a healthy pregnancy, and there had been no outward signs that the baby might be in distress. I gulped as I tried to find the words to pacify this indignant man. I'm so sorry for your loss, Rog. I really am. You must be dreadfully upset. I mean, I can't imagine what you're going through right now. Upset? Is that all you can say? I must be upset? That's an understatement, woman. You're clueless, aren't you? Completely clueless. You killed my baby. You were the one that insisted that my wife had her baby at home in a birthing pool. This is all your fault. Rog! Please don't hurt me, I whimpered. Can we not talk about this? I know you're upset, and I understand where you're coming from. As I was saying, I can't imagine what you must be going through. It's just so devastating, losing a baby. I mean, it's terrible. But lashing out at me, it's not going to help anyone. Let's talk about this calmly, shall we? Shall we sit down? I can make us a cup of tea. I'll put lots of sugar in your tea, shall I? Talk about what, woman? Why is it women always want to talk? There is nothing to say as far as I'm concerned. It's all too late for that. The damage is done. You ruined my life. You killed my baby boy. I hope you're proud of yourself. Izzy is heartbroken. I'm so sorry, Rog. Really I am, I said, my eyes widening, as one of his fists went slamming into my face, hitting me across my nose and my upper cheeks. It was excruciatingly painful, and I could tell that my nose had broken. Blood was pouring down my face, but that was the very least of my concerns. I have never encountered the anger I saw in Rog that night. I sensed that my life was in serious jeopardy, and was hanging precariously from a fine shoestring, and was so close to being snapped, and I had to make sure that that did not happen. I knew that I couldn't say anything to this man. There was no reasoning with him, as in his mind I was the one that killed his baby boy, because I had encouraged his wife to give birth to her baby in a birthing pool, and that wasn't true in itself. But the blame was obviously being levelled at me, and he wanted me to be accountable for what had happened to his wife. The blame was being unreasonably laid at my door. Rog wanted to avenge his baby's death by hurting or probably killing me. Rog could not be trusted. I knew he was capable of a great evil from the very first day I'd encountered him. By the sounds of things, if Izzy's baby was a stillborn, not even the hospitals would have been able to save the child. But I couldn't find the words to say this to Rog, as it would provoke his unquenchable rage to even more anger. He was looking for someone to blame for what had happened to his baby boy, and I would do very nicely, thank you very much. I didn't want to be like a matador in a ring, rigorously waving a red flag in front of a bull to make the animal even more incensed. Rog was bubbling with rage, and saying anything was like throwing gas onto an open fire and making it 1,000 zillion times worse. I was living on borrowed time, and it was running out. Rog was going to kill me tonight, and I knew this with every fibre of my being. Please, Rog, I begged him, don't hurt me. I'm so sorry for your loss, really I am. But your baby was stillborn. Even if it had been born in a hospital, I promise you they'd not have been able to save him. You see it in the wilds all the time. You know, deer giving birth to stillborns. It happens with horses and all kinds of animals and humans too. And there's nothing you can do to save the baby in that situation. Surely you must know that. This isn't your fault, it's not Izzy's fault, it's not my fault. It is what it is.
Shut up, you bitch. This is your fault. You killed my baby. Get that?
I could feel Roger's fist pounding into me. He wanted to make me suffer before he finally killed me. That was the idea, as he delivered to my body a multitude of very powerful blows, one after another. The pain was like nothing I've ever experienced on this earth. I was crumpled on the floor in a bedraggled, desperate heap, cowering before Rog like a frightened animal, burying my face and my head behind my hands to stop Rog from attacking me in my most vulnerable spots. My defensive gestures were completely futile. Finally, he hit me so hard on the head that I completely blacked out. A while later I came round, as he was rolling me up in my carpet, but thankfully he did so loosely. I realized he must have thought I was dead. It was the most terrifying thing to have to endure, being rolled up in a carpet, completely suffocating. I felt as if I couldn't breathe. My only chance to stay alive was to pretend to be dead, and so I did just that, because I did not want him to deliver me one more final lethal blow. I could taste blood in my mouth, and my whole body was throbbing in agonizing pain. I'm glad to say that my moments of consciousness were brief, as I slipped into an unconscious oblivion, and that may have actually saved my life, as Rog really was convinced that I was deceased. Everything did go black for me, and after that I remember nothing, until I found myself caught up in this delirious, confused, disorientated state that was possibly as close to being in a coma as you can get. I mistakenly, falsely believed I was in a hospital, and had no immediate memory of what Rog had actually done to me. The last time I had felt as hopelessly incapacitated as this was when I was coming around from the anaesthetic following my wrist operation. Only this was 1,000 times worse, because I couldn't seem to break through the ambiguously foggy blur of my comatose state, even though I was fully aware of my surroundings, except I didn't know where I was. It began to dawn on me with a stunned revelation that I could not be in a hospital. Instead of smelling that strong, overpowering scent of antiseptic you commonly smell in a sterile environment like a hospital, on the contrary, I was smelling earthy smells, the smell of something fragrant that gave me the impression that I was in a garden of some kind. The smell reminded me of orange blossom. What was I doing out of doors? I could feel a cool breeze blowing against my skin, and it was oddly pleasant. That would never happen in a hospital, unless someone left a window wide open that allowed the outside in, which I seriously doubted. I heard no voices, but I was aware of a presence around me that swaddled me in reassurance. As strange as it sounds, I heard what I can only describe as a female voice saying in my head, "Have no fear of us. You're going to be fine. We're watching over you. You're in good hands." I was convinced that the voice was angelic, something outer-worldly and supernatural, as if God himself had been communicating with me, and the paradoxical experience brought me a huge measure of comfort, for I believed the voice telling me I was going to be fine, even though every part of me told me otherwise, must have been God himself. I became aware of gentle hands on me. Someone was putting water into my very dry, parched mouth, stroking my blood-soaked hair and pulling it away from my face. My cheeks were being dabbed with something that felt like a wet sponge. At first it caused an uncomfortable stinging sensation on my skin, which burned for a while, with a very fierce pain, and then thankfully that subsided. Finally, as I became more conscious in my rather groggy state, I could hear voices around me. 2 of them distinctly sounded female. They were rather high-pitched, and 2 of them sounded male. These voices boomed, with a deep, low resonance, the kind of voice you would pay quick attention to, because it was authoritative and powerful. If you were asking someone to play the part of God in a movie, then this is the voice you should recruit, because it would get your attention at once. I remember thinking how bizarre this experience was, as these strangers around me were speaking so fast, backwards and forwards, in a foreign language. I tried to think if I'd heard this language before from somewhere, but there was nothing remotely familiar about it. It was a strange language. It wasn't like French, German, Chinese, or even Dutch. If the truth be told, the language sounded ancient in its origins. Whoever these strange people were, they were discussing me at great length. Of that I was in no doubt. I had become the centre of their focus, and I sensed they genuinely cared about my well-being. A while later I could feel the temperature had dipped. I became conscious that I was shivering with cold. It was getting very cool. And then I felt something being thrown over my body that felt like a heavy blanket, only it smelt really manky, with an animal-like smell, as if I was lying under a dog blanket. It wasn't a very pleasing smell, but the blanket helped keep the cold at bay, and for that I was extremely grateful. When night arrived, even though I couldn't physically see it, I certainly felt it. I could hear the chirping sounds of the crickets and frogs, and that was when I became conspicuously aware that I was definitely out of doors somewhere. I could sense the crickets seemed mere inches away from me. There were more smells that became very conspicuous to me, and I could hear the crackling and spitting sounds of a fire, and feel the warmth from the flames, as well as the smell of wood being burnt. I'd always loved outdoor campfires, as growing up as a child I would sit around the fire pit with my grandparents, on an outdoor camping trip, eating s'mores and listening to my grandfather's ghost stories, which were always dreadful, because they did not scare at all, although I always pretended that I was scared to death by them, because it would be rude to make my grandfather think his stories were rather redundant. It definitely felt that I was on one of those nostalgic outdoor camping trips with my grandfather. The pungent smells of the great outdoors were oddly comforting. I wished to God I could wake up to get a greater perspective of my bearings, and who these kind people were that appeared to be watching over me. One thing for sure was, they were not American. I still felt as if I was locked under some paradoxical coma, where you are aware of what's going on around you, but you simply cannot participate in it, which is incredibly frustrating. In the background I heard the smacking sounds of lips, chewing sounds, people talking while they ate. I heard shuffling movements, and then talking again. One of the people around me began to whistle a tune. It was very pretty. I remember thinking to myself that even my grandfather, who was an excellent whistler, had never been able to whistle that well. These people were watching over me. Whoever they were, I sensed they were different from normal folk. How did I get out here, I wondered, and who were these people? I tried to piece the enigmatic puzzle together, but I seemed to be suffering from an annoying amnesia, as far as the most recent events were concerned, so I couldn't figure out why I was out here with these strange people, what had happened to me, why they were taking care of me. All these were questions that I could not answer. Throughout what must have been an entire night, I was carefully attended to diligently, with water being dropped into my mouth, and the wounds on my body being cleaned. I was absolutely exhausted, extremely fatigued. My whole body ached. I would drift into long absences of unconsciousness, when I must have been sleeping for a long time. I would wake up to hear the drone of these foreign voices that became like white background noise to me. It was when the morning broke that I felt as if the sensation of being anaesthetized was finally drifting away. I began to flutter my eyes, and then slowly but surely my eyelids opened. The first thing I saw was the lofty trees with their long trunks towering above me, their outstretched sculptural branches covered with leafy foliage. I could see the sky was a pewter grey colour. Soft prisms of golden light were spreading across the horizon, staining the sky as the morning was being birthed. Slowly but surely, I sat up with a start, very much aware of how much my body was throbbing all over. I could feel I had a banging headache. It was excruciatingly painful around the back of my eyes and the temple area. I heard a shuffle on my side and promptly turned around to observe the shadowy, rather ambiguous figure, seated down on a fallen tree trunk. This creature, whatever it was, appeared to be eyeballing me. I looked up and our eyes met. To my astonishment, I was staring at a female Bigfoot. I was so shocked by this, because I'd never believed in cryptic creatures before. But now I almost certainly did, as this human-looking creature was no optical illusion. The Bigfoot, on seeing me wake up, began to whistle excitedly. She cried out something. "Kilatina! Kilatina! Kilatina!" She clapped her hands in jubilation, as if seeing me awake was the best thing that had ever happened to her. She began to jump up and down ebulliently, whistling and clapping her hands. That was when these forms, rather shapeless looking, that had been lying around me, that I thought were fallen logs, stretched out beside the dying embers of a campfire, suddenly burst into life, like the trees in the Lord of the Rings. It really was rather startling. I was surrounded by 4 powerful Bigfoot, whose inquiring, inquisitive, curious eyes were studying me with abject awe, as if I was the Christ raised from the dead. They whistled together, clapped, and stamped their feet with abject delight. I could sense they were over the moon to see that I had finally returned to the land of the living. Their enthusiasm was infectious. It made me smile. I had a grin on my face so wide it would have put a Cheshire cat to shame. I warmed to these Bigfoots at once, for their kindness to me was palpable. They were presenting me with berries, leaves, pieces of dead squirrel. I ate the berries. They were sweet and delicious, but I discreetly tucked the squirrel into the foliage so as not to cause offence. In a trice the morning light had broken through the trees without apology, so the Bigfoots were fully illuminated, and I could see them clearly. They were a family consisting of 1 girl and a boy, mother and father. The male Bigfoot was so gargantuan in size, there are no words to describe him to you. The girth of his body was like something I've never seen before. It was astonishing. It was like one of those majestic Californian redwood trees. To say he was splendid is an understatement. Everything about him demanded complete respect, and when he spoke, even the birds paid swift attention to him, for they stopped their tuneful chorus. Indeed, the 2 adult Bigfoots were solidly built, ripped with muscle, and covered in long flowing dark hair, the colour of black coal, but with a dark blue undertone that I could see clearly in the morning light. I've never seen a colour quite like that. The lofty male could have been over 10 foot tall. The female may have been about 7.5 foot tall. The 2 younglings were between 5 to 6 feet. Their proportions were gangly and streamlined, unlike their parents, almost as if they had to fill out quite considerably. I observed the remnants of a wispy grey smoke rising from what was left of the fire in the fire pit. I also noticed the thing that had been covering me all night long to keep me warm was a bear pelt. No wonder it smelt so disgusting. The Bigfoots began to talk among each other excitedly. I knew they were discussing me. "Kilatila, hopolitana, sokolo shokosa."
"Ah, minalikwa, tolopani kasanakwa, hilasina tulopona."
"Ikila, ikolo sopoto, aki kwasanatu, opolikatilakwa."
"Ah, mi katalana, ho pishakisala, ho manitalakwa, idana solo."
All of a sudden, the excited chatter subsided very suddenly when the male Bigfoot raised his hand to silence everybody, and then he spoke. It was as dramatic as turning off the radio. His voice boomed. I felt no fear. I instinctively knew that although these Bigfoots were the most intimidating, fearsome creatures I'd ever encountered, they were so human in every regard, and were obviously emotionally intelligent, and they had displayed their hospitality to me by offering me food and shelter. The one thing I remember clearly was how different their faces were. Their skins were rather leathery and grey. Their protruding foreheads were heavily wrinkled, and they had high cheekbones, flat noses, and deep-set hooded eyes. Their faces were remarkably expressive, their gestures dramatic. I observed as they used their overlong arms a great deal when they talked. They seemed to act out what they were saying with these gestures. When the male Bigfoot spoke, I have never heard such a powerful voice before. The most extraordinary thing happened. The words he spoke seemed to be translated in my mind, like some kind of advanced intelligence. I only understood what he was saying when he spoke directly to me. If he spoke to another Bigfoot, I would not be able to comprehend what he was saying. I was taken aback by this ability. Who were these creatures? Why did they have these extraordinary superpowers? I wish I knew the answer to those questions, but I still don't.
Komatilana hasagila sopo, hakila kwasina. We are glad to see you have finally woken up. We were worried that you would not. The bad man came here. He dug a big grave for you in the ground. He believed you were dead. We knew different. Hatinatolo bakikwasa. We observed your life force hanging outside your body, but you were still connected to the silver cord. We knew the man had hurt you. His dark, hateful energy rose out of his body like black smoke. It upset us greatly. We usually destroy black energy like that, but we chose to let this man be, for it is not our nature to kill your kind, unless we feel it has to be done. If we have been threatened in any way by your people, then we will not hesitate to kill. This man was going to bury you, but we chased him away. He was very afraid of us. We could not let him bury you alive. Om polinatila, ha makisakwana, ho bolitalasu, ha fanisha. Do you remember what happened to you? Or why this man brought you to this place? We could see he was no good.
The male Bigfoot looked directly into my eyes, questioningly, and all 4 Bigfoots were now focusing on me, almost as if expecting me to give them some kind of explanation as to what had happened to me. But I couldn't. I shook my head, because for a brief moment my memory was so blank, like a piece of paper with no writing on it. But the Bigfoot's words drilled through me, rather like a jackhammer drill. Someone had been digging a grave for me. But who? What bad man were they talking about? Then suddenly, in the next explosive second, memories seemed to resurface in my head, and they were far from pretty. I could see Roger's furious face just steaming with indignation as he stormed violently into my apartment with the fiery incandescent rage of a herd of furious elephants that want to destroy and savagely kill everything in their path. The man claimed I'd killed his baby boy because it was a stillborn birth, and in that moment I had unequivocally known that I was living on borrowed time, as there was no negotiating with a man driven by his own insanity. When Izzy had given birth to a stillborn baby in her apartment next door to me, I had simply assumed that everything had gone swimmingly, as I had heard her pained cries when she had given birth, and the reassuring murmurs of the midwife. I had gone to bed that night with a contented, gleeful smile on my face, knowing that in the morning Izzy would give me her great news. The trouble was the news had not been good. The baby had been born dead. It does happen sometimes to women. I couldn't imagine what Izzy must have been going through. It must have been too dreadful for words. But I had been woken up in the middle of the night by what sounded like the axeman at my door. My instincts to grab the baseball bat that I kept under my bed had been right on the money. But when I saw Rog at the door, I foolishly put the bat down and let the man into my apartment. It was the most unwise decision on my part. I guess I had naively and rather ignorantly assumed that he was going to announce the good news to me, and maybe apologize to me for being so hard and unreasonable towards me about the birthing pool his wife had ordered. But the moment he entered my apartment, I realized I had invited into my apartment the devil and his minions. Of course I could fully comprehend the man's grief. That was completely understandable, as his baby was born dead. But there was no excuse to avenge me like this, and to lay the blame at my door. I realized he falsely assumed that if his wife had been safely cocooned in a hospital bed, with the nurses and doctors swooning around her, administering epidurals and helping with the delivery, that everything would have gone smoothly. Indeed, he wrongly perceived his baby might have survived. The truth, of course, is very different, for everyone who knows anything about stillborn births will know you cannot bring such a baby back to life when it's born dead. I suspect Rog was using me as his very convenient punching bag. I knew he blamed me for everything, given I was the one that suggested that Izzy could give birth in a birthing pool. He had promptly decided I was indirectly responsible for his son's death, but this time he'd gone too far. He had tried to avenge me by killing me. Indeed, he assumed I was dead when he'd wrapped me up in my carpet and brought me to God knows where. I'm amazed I didn't suffocate in that carpet, but he hadn't closed it tightly enough, and the pile was very thick. I realized he must have brought me here in the Range Rover he drove. I suspected he was probably familiar with the sequestered part of Washington State, and thought he could get away with murder. How wrong he was about that. It would seem, when Rog began digging a grave to dispose of my body, the Bigfoots had chased him off. He must have had a hell of a shock. I almost laughed at the very thought of him being chased off by these Bigfoots. So he hadn't been able to accomplish his insidious, depraved goal. The man really was a monster of the worst kind. The Bigfoots led me through the woodgrove to show me where Rog had dug my grave. I could see the rolled-up piece of carpet lying beneath some thorny briars. It was the one from my living room, and was beyond retrievable now. And there was his trowel lying by the open grave. He hadn't even succeeded in finishing it.
"We chased him," said the male Bigfoot to me.
"I don't know how to thank you," I said. "I've heard of your kind before, of course I had. I didn't believe the reports, you know. I thought they were just fabrications, people's imaginations, you know, that sort of thing."
"Kampatana tua, hakilo tola mita, akila tolo pasa, wolo. We don't particularly like your kind to know about us," said the male Bigfoot. "It isn't in their best interests. Sometimes we reveal ourselves to your kind, and often we choose to help those people that need our help. But often they will not know that we have helped them, because we wipe their memories clean."
"Please don't wipe my memory. I want to remember you."
"Kela-tila-pana. We wouldn't dream of it."
"I used to hear these terrible things about your kind, attacking people, causing dreadful harm. Of course I never believed it, because I never believed you existed. So it's hard to believe in something like that if you don't believe in the existence of them." The Bigfoot seemed to chuckle at my words.
"Kakilato, hakilanatuala, pasinatolo bilaki, hasha. Your kind can be evil too, can they not? I've seen it all too often. Like the man that tried to bury you alive. He may not be built like us, but he was evil to the very core. We could see that. We are not much different to your kind, although we have greater powers than you, and you lack our strength. But there are those among yourselves that are very bad, just as there are those among us that are bad. Everything in life has its intrinsic opposite, does it not? The good and the bad, the black and the white. So yes, there are groups among my people that are not good. But believe it or not, the vast majority of us are."
"I believe that," I said, "because you saved my life. How can I ever forget that? How can I ever thank you?"
"Ela tolopono, pasakira twalasi, ha shakisana." "That is not necessary. But we need to get you back to safety," said the male Bigfoot. "We will take you to a farmhouse. We know the family that lives there are good. Their energy is light. They will help you."
I'm glad to say the Bigfoot was absolutely right. He led me to the farmhouse, and the family there helped me. The police were called. They learnt about the gravesite, as I told them in detail everything that Rog had done to me. Of course, I didn't tell them how I'd escaped the insidious man's clutches, because I didn't want to tell them about the Bigfoot. It would seem DNA on the shovel and on my carpet belonged to Rog, affirming that he was indeed the one who dug the grave. But luckily he confessed to his crime in order to get a lighter sentence and to blame his behaviour on a moment of insanity, as he was so grieved by the stillbirth. I took careful note that he never mentioned that he was chased off by Bigfoots, and that was one thing the authorities couldn't understand, was why he had never buried me, why he hadn't completed digging the grave, and why he had left a deceased body that was not deceased in the woodgrove. Some answers were clearly leaving them very perplexed, but nobody was filling in the details for them, and I certainly wasn't going to. The authorities had very little compassion on him, of course, and he was charged and accused of attempted murder. Izzy got divorced from Rog while he remained in prison. She was grateful she'd never have to see his face again. "He's handsome," she said. "Of course he is. But isn't it amazing how ugly someone can become when you find out who they really are beneath all the good-looking layers?" Izzy was naturally devastated to lose her baby. Of course she was. But she was grateful she no longer had to live with Rog. So good came out of the bad, as it always does. So she had an opportunity to begin again and put the past behind her, which she very firmly did. I persuaded Izzy to move into my apartment for a while, and she did. The two of us grew very close. I got Mr. Bridges to give her a job at Centerfile, where she was promoted. But the moment those two met, there were sparks flying all over the place. By the look on Mr. Bridges' face, I knew he was smitten by Izzy. I remember he said to me, "Where did you find her?" I said, "She was my next-door neighbour. She desperately needs a job."
"A job she is welcome to have."
Suffice to say, tongues wagged in the office for quite some time, as it was clear that Izzy and Mr. Bridges had become an item. The couple married, and I was the maid of honour at their wedding, and the godmother to their first baby, a little boy called Luke. Mr. Bridges, beneath the formidable exterior, is one of the kindest people you can ever hope to meet. And Izzy thinks the sun shines out of his backside. And do you know what? It probably does. We remain the best of friends today. I never did see the Bigfoots again, but I'm ever so grateful that they saved my life. And it proves one thing among the bad in this world. There is still good around, and I am very grateful for that. So there you are. That's my story. What an extraordinary story. Oh my word, can you imagine that? An unorthodox birthing process leads to a stillborn baby, leads to a furious husband determined to kill someone who suggests that the birthing pool is a good idea, putting the blame on that girl, and then it all ends up like this. What an extraordinary story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.